All right. Next question, we'll make it the last one. Brian R. Duffy, who says, I don't get the feeling Glenn is very interested in discussing the tariff situation. I don't know if he thinks it's really not a subject he has a lot to offer on or what, but I'm curious if there is anyone out there who thinks the tariffs can actually accomplish the stated goal of improving our manufacturing industry. I understand it's a leverage tool for negotiations as well. Most of the coverage I have seen is pessimistic about the chances of it working. Is there a guest that Glenn could have on that we could trust to shed some light on this subject? Now, obviously, this is something we've been thinking about and have been discussing because the tariff policies that President Trump unveiled are indescribably consequential. They're causing consequences all throughout the world, not just economically, but geopolitically, and they're affecting every country in transformative ways. And one of the things I hope you listened to when I asked Professor Mearsheimer about tariffs, I specifically said, look, I'm not really asking you to describe what you think the economic outcome will be. Will it bring back manufacturing base? Is it just a negotiating ploy? Will it drive up inflation or unemployment? Is it a tax? And the reason I didn't ask him that is because I know that he's not an economist. He didn't study economics. He's not an expert on tariffs or economic policy. And so I just wanted to give him that out to say, look, I'm not asking you to comment on the tariffs themselves, just how they affect the relationship between U.S. and China. And I expected and I really appreciated the fact that he said, look, I can't talk about the economics of tariffs because I'm not an expert in this. I really don't know. And so one of the things that I've always tried hard to do since the beginning of my journalism career, since I had that blog back in 2005 and 2006, even when I was writing every day, you can go back and see, I don't write about topics where I don't feel like I have any specialized knowledge or expertise or particularly valuable insight. I don't know much about economic theory. I don't have the credibility or the competence, in my view, to sit here and opine on what the outcome of tariffs would be. I could if I wanted to. I've been reading all the things that you've been reading. I've been listening to all the people debate tariffs. Not just now, but back in the first Trump administration. That was something he was advocating back then and did to some extent, nowhere near the extent to now. But I rarely talk about economic policy because I feel like I have a decent understanding of it, the kind of understanding that you get if you read, and listen to the news or to experts. I talk to people whose views I respect on this issue, but I would be a fraud, I feel like, if I sat here and said, okay, I'm going to explain to you now the implications economically of tariffs, because I don't know, and I just don't want to talk about it. Now, the one thing I do know about that I think is interesting and that I can talk about is the political evolution of this issue, by which I mean specifically that for as long as I've been watching the American left, they have hated free trade, hated it. One of the biggest criticisms on the left of Bill and Hillary Clinton, and one of the things that people hate about the Clintons, is NAFTA. And those other free trade agreements that ended up, I think in the view of a lot of people, certainly a lot of people on the left, hauling out the manufacturing base, deindustrializing the middle of the country, causing massive unemployment and the shuttering of factories, the downward mobility of the middle class, and the shipping of jobs overseas. I remember, watching the 1992 presidential debate where Ross Perot said, "Do you hear that sucking sound? That's the sound of jobs being sucked out of the United States, immediately heading to Mexico." And he proved to be totally prescient on this. There's a really interesting video that we'll put in the show notes next week. I actually promoted it on X when I saw it earlier and watched it. It was when Pat Buchanan wrote his 2011 book, I think it's called The Death of a Superpower. He went on a C-SPAN show that was hosted by Ralph Nader. So you had Ralph Nader, well on the left, in fact, so on the left that he ran to the Democratic Party's left in 2000. A lot of people think he cost Al Gore the election. I don't, but so you have Pat Buchanan, you have Ralph Nader on the left here, you have Pat Buchanan obviously on the right, the populist right, and they both completely agreed on the evils of free trade. In fact, both of them were at the 1999 very famous, notorious protest outside the World Trade Organization in Seattle that turned violent because a lot of kind of Antifa types. I mean, there was no Antifa then, but same kind of strain. But there were huge numbers of people there from the left and the right who didn't engage in violence, but were there to protest world trade, global trade, free trade. And, I think the idea that free trade and globalism are evils socially, economically, politically, is as close to a consensus on the American left, maybe in the Western left, as I think you can get. So I have to say, it's a little odd now to watch, finally, a politician who promised this during the election. It's not like he unveiled this out of nowhere. He promised he was going to do this during the election. Most of what Trump's doing is stuff he talked about in the election, not trying to get Greenland or the Panama Canal, not bombing Yemen, but a lot of the most controversial stuff, including invoking the Alien Enemies Act to have full discretion to deport not just illegal people here illegally, but also legally, all this stuff he talked about on the campaign trail. And tariffs was one of them, and people voted for them. They got convinced that that would help. So it's very odd for me to see people on the left I'm not saying they have to support exactly how Trump is doing the tariffs. They do seem a bit haphazard to me. But again, I'm not going to opine on that. But it seems odd for people on the left to reflexively say, oh my God, these tariffs are terrible, and to even cite the fact that Wall Street is angry about them, that the stock market is declining because of it, as though that's some terrible thing. Now the left is afraid of alienating Wall Street. I thought the whole point was that we're tired of policies that only benefit a tiny sliver of the country. This concentrated corporate power that's globalist in nature. Wall Street barons, tycoons, and the like. So because it's Trump, now a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, we don't want tariffs. We want to keep the regime of global trade, of free trade. Really? That's not what I've ever heard previously. And then there are a lot of people, I think the smarter, more thoughtful people who don't have this reflexive reaction to Trump, who are saying tariffs can actually do important and beneficial things. We need them. We have to start undermining the regime of free trade. It's just not this way that he's doing it is not the correct way, which seems to me to be a middle ground. But it's kind of like immigration, where opposition to open borders, when I started writing about politics, was a very left-wing position. Bernie Sanders in 2016 when he ran was asked by his recline about open borders, and he was horrified. Bernie Sanders said, open borders? That's what you favored? That's a Koch brothers proposal. And back then it was George Bush and Dick Cheney and the Chamber of Commerce and John McCain, people who were very corporatist in their interests and orientations, who wanted immigration reform, wanted to open up the borders much more, because that's beneficial to large American corporations. If you flood the labor market with cheap labor, you drive down the cost of doing business, you increase the bottom line, you gut out the unions and the protections that American labor has, which is exactly what happened. And that's why the left was opposed to it. Cesar Chavez, the Mexican-American union leader, hated immigration. There's an article in 2011 by Jamil Bowie in the American Prospect, who's now like the supposed left-wing columnist for the New York Times. He's really just a partisan Democrat, but he wrote, when he was at the American Prospect, an article, I think it was in 2010, warning Democrats not to be too aggressive about or permissive about immigration, because he said the people who will lose their jobs and suffer the most are Black and Latino Americans. Those are the ones who will lose their job first, who will have to compete with undocumented immigrants. This was, it was a left-wing view opposing immigration, and the establishment Republican Party, you had those populists, but the establishment Republican Party wanted open borders. And so now you just have this complete mix now. And it's in a lot of ways the same with tariffs. I'm just amazed at how many people are so horrified that Wall Street doesn't like Trump's plan, that they're throwing a tantrum, that they, I guess, want to preserve now the system of free trade. So again, I'm not commenting on, because I can't, the merits of the tariffs and how they're done. I just see that political aspect to it. And we might have somebody on. We talked about having somebody on this week. The problem is that if I just have an economist on who's like vehemently opposed to or vocally in support of Trump's tariff regime, I really won't be able to push back on it the way I need to. And they'll just be here to state one opinion. I won't really have the chops, especially if they're experts in tariffs and trade to be able to push back. We talked about maybe having two people on who have some different views that I could kind of mediate so you can hear the clash of ideas, which I think is probably the best way to do it. But it is true that in general, I've often not covered very important topics simply if I think I lack the expertise or the competence to do so. You cannot be an expert in everything. I think one of the downfalls, in fact, of American journalism and American punditry is that people feel compelled to just pontificate on everything, including things they know virtually nothing about. And that's something I really try and avoid. And I was glad that Professor Mearsheimer obviously abstained as well from talking about a topic in which he wasn't an expert either. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.